Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Feeling Smarter. Today, once again, I'm joined by Tim Miller, our Head of Technical and Education. G'day, Tim. How are you?
I'm well, Aaron. How are you going?
Very well, thank you. So today we're going to talk about what I call the Bible of pensions, in particular from a tax perspective, and that is Tax Ruling 2013/5. And we have finally seen the ATO provide us with a draft update for consultation that really takes on board a lot of the reforms that we saw within 2017 and even some changes thereafter. And it got me thinking, Tim, as we looked at this particular topic, was to explore the differences and questions that we get around how we need to look at pensions, both in the context of commencement and cessation, from both a SIS perspective and the governing rules, and then how the ATO views it from an income tax perspective. So maybe throw a question to you to kick things off here. And one of the common things that we see with clients is the fact that we need to look at taking advantage of using that 1 June start date, because it might give us that tax exemption for the end of the financial year, because we know from the 1st of June, there is no obligation to actually have to draw a minimum. But that, in theory, is only half the equation, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it is, because I mean the 1 June thing is obviously a critical point from a commencement point. If there's a lot of planning around, say, the investment strategy of a fund and the capacity to potentially sell down assets with significant capital gains late in the financial year and reduce the tax liability. So we do have this 1 June minimum requirement, which means, okay, well, we can kickstart our pension from that day. We know that we can not have to worry about paying the minimum, but potentially get our exempt pension income deduction. But of course, the key issue around all of this is that to do that, you have to meet the definition of an income stream and then an income stream benefit, which is the payment that comes from that income stream. And that's one of the things that is, I guess, reiterated through this ruling, both in its original and newly updated form.
Yeah, and in fact, I guess it's always referred to the fact that we have this liability to pay benefits to members where they have a series of payments that are connected to each other. And this is where people might ordinarily think that that could be monthly, when yes, it does. But it can also mean that it could be done annually, but we would need to connect a payment from year one then into year two. And this is where people can potentially get caught on this issue, because you say, well, maybe if we're going to start the pension on the 1st of July and it gives us either a tax exemption through the certificate or maybe even a deemed segregated period, we need to very quickly be able to establish that we actually have an income stream. Well, the ATO is very clear that in that instance, if we ended up maybe failing the pension next year for some reason, then therefore, not only have we created a tax problem in the current year, but maybe in that previous year where we started that in 1 June, we've actually now got a tax problem in there as well.
Yeah, and look, and that's probably one of the key messages, is that the tax office are very clear that it says that it goes down the path that one payment doesn't make a series. So one payment a year over multiple years makes a series, but one payment over 1 year is not a series.
And therefore, having the discretion, I think, does become important. I think we've spoken about this previously as well, around the fact that Smarter SMSF's pension documents, we give that opportunity to go, well, when we're creating a pension that is in essence an agreement between the trustee and the member, we need to conform with what the rules of that pension contract, and therefore aligning to the deed, actually says. So that trustee discretion may become really important to this process, because otherwise, if we're not following what the actual requirements are of that particular pension, then we could end up in a situation where we obviously fail that minimum obligation, and most importantly, fail the terms that have been agreed to between the trustee and the member in the first instance.
Yeah, and look, and I think that is no more clearer than when we talk about the definition of what is a super income stream benefit, and the ATO are quite clear within the ruling that it talks about the periodical payment. So if you have monthly payments set up, that it talks about those monthly payments always been considered to be a super income stream benefit, i.e. a pension payment. Whereas, of course, subject to the rules of the pension and the rules that we outline within the governing rules, if we provide that discretion and we are prospectively actioning these transactions to determine what the nature of a payment is, then we can determine whether something is going to be a pension or indeed a partial commutation. But once you've passed the point of no return, and that is the payment date, then you don't really have that sort of discretion, and you're going to have to treat something as most likely a pension payment.
Yeah, and that goes back to really what the commissioner said here originally, and around what is a valid commutation, which is why they introduced that PCG in 2017 to comply with the laws there. And so there's no real change or anything that's really moved the needle from what we've understood within this tax ruling, but really just reaffirmed the importance of, in particular with commutations, that decision must be prospective. It cannot be revoked in any way, or otherwise it would prejudice the fact that it wouldn't be a valid commutation, and ultimately it will be treated as an income stream benefit payment.
Yeah, correct. And I think, look, that's the overriding reading that I get from this draft or this amendment to the original ruling, is that a lot of it is tidying up the significant changes that have occurred along the way, such as the introduction of the transfer balance cap, the removal of a Truste from being in retirement phase to in the accumulation phase, but still representing itself as a separate superannuation interest. So the ruling really does sort of highlight those key taxation elements that do separate pensions from their requirements under the SIS Act.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think the ATO is leaving some of that issue around what's required under SIS and what's required under the governing rules to the fund itself to ultimately have to deal with, but making it very clear, as they did initially, that when you actually pay the pension, you must be paying it in accordance with not only what the laws require, but you must then comply with the documentation that has ultimately been agreed as part of that commencement process as well. So thank you once again, Tim, for joining me this week. Have a great rest of the week. We'll speak soon.
No worries. Thanks, Aaron. Cheers.
Bye for now.